Hi class, and welcome to week 4 in English 102. This week you're going to get started on your first reader response. You'll do 2 reader responses in a row, one this week and one next week, and then we'll work through the writing process on your first major essay. So the structure of the class is that we have 4 reader responses, each worth 100 points, and then 2 major long researched essays worth 200 points apiece. The way that they're graded and the way that you'll approach them is a little bit different. These reader responses are a little bit more casual, whereas the longer essays are a lot more structured. However, they are still essays. They're still worth 100 points. Attached to this email is going to be a rubric, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But first, it's very important that you review the slideshow on MLA Citation for this first reader response and all of your reader responses. I expect you to have in-text citations as well as a works cited page. And just a hint, starting on the 9th screen of that slideshow, there's an example of how to cite one of the short stories from your textbook, and it shows you how to do the end citation as well as the in-text citation. And that is how you're going to cite all of the stories from your textbook. So at least for the primary texts for this reader response and all of your future essays, that shows you exactly how to do that citation. The only thing that you need to do differently is make sure that it's formatted correctly with a hanging indent and a double space, and then you need to switch out the title and author of the short story along with the page range that it's on. And that's basically your format for all of your citations that come out of the Norton Introduction to Literature for the rest of the semester. So no excuse for getting it wrong. Just make sure that you look at that example of the Edgar Allan Poe story starting on the 9th screen of that slideshow on MLA Citation that's listed under this week's assignments. Other things about the reader response, so there are 2 instruction sheets. The first instruction sheet, which you'll print out from the folder for week 4 assignments, is a general instruction sheet for all of the reader response assignments throughout the semester, 4 total. And so it goes over that you need to use MLA formatting, submit it as a rich text format document attached to your blog post. You need a clear thesis, a clear intro, body, and conclusion. It's okay to use I, although not unnecessarily. If you're talking specifically about your responses or places that confused you, things like that, it is a reader response. You can use I there, but not to use it in your thesis where you're making a claim about the text. You are expected to be analytical in these, focusing on one specific aspect of a story. So that's or poem for the second 2, but short story for these first 2. So that's the general information. So print that out, keep referring to it, it's important. However, what's also important is to look at the specific instructions for this particular reader response, and you do that by clicking on the link to where you'll post the blog posts for your reader response. And there you will see the specific instructions for this assignment, which leads you to check out the character and figurative language sections in your Norton and to respond to one of the stories in there. So there's a story by Toni Morrison and a story by David Foster Wallace that you can use for your response if you would like to focus on character. And there is a story by Nathaniel Hawthorne and one by Edwidge Dantikamp if you would like to focus on figurative language. So you want to choose one focus, one story, and your response will be to that. So if you choose Hawthorne, the Birthmark, and you're doing a paper on figurative language, you want to have a thesis that answers the question, how is Hawthorne using figurative language in order to influence the meaning of his story? And remember, you want to make that move from just saying, you know, the birthmark is a symbol for this, to then what does that mean about the meaning or purpose or intention of the story as a whole. And if you go back and take a look at the discussion board for this last week, and you look at my comments on your thesis statements, those may help to guide you to what you need to do to make your thesis more assertive or argumentative. And usually that's just asking the question, so what? So if I say that Hawthorne's birthmark is a symbol for scientific revolution. I'm totally making this up, by the way. Got to come up with your own for the paper. Then I have to ask the question, so what? What does that mean for the meaning of the story as a whole? Well, maybe that means that scientific revolution is this like horrible, threatening thing, and that's what Hawthorne believes. And so I want to put all that together into a thesis and say that Hawthorne, or the author of the story's fear of upcoming scientific revolution is shown through the symbol of the birthmark in the story of the birthmark. Okay, so you want to bring that all in together to one clear, concise statement that's going to guide the rest of your paper, because then you spend all the body paragraphs sort of coming up with ways to prove that. Places in the text that show that your interpretation is the right interpretation, while still acknowledging that of course there are other interpretations. There isn't only one. Remember, literature is not a puzzle to be solved. It's, you know, an interpretive exercise where there are many different possible answers. And the only test for whether an answer works or not is whether it works, whether you can support it with evidence from the text itself, which is the only evidence you have for this particular essay. You're not looking at context or outside sources. Please don't go to SparkNotes. Please don't use the author's biography to talk about what you think is happening, because really all of your evidence is right there on the page in the story, and I want you to stick to that, kind of like we practiced last week, but on a bigger scale. That's pretty much the idea of the reader response. I am going to attach to the email I'm sending this announcement out in the rubric that I'll be using. It's based on the holistic grading guide, which is how I'll be assessing your long essays. I'll be assessing those holistically, and you'll be getting a lot of comments in the margins and such things. But for these shorter essays, I'll be assessing it with the rubric that's attached, where you get 10 points for each area from off of the larger holistic rubric. So that means that there are 10 things that I'm looking for. And those things are focus, that you have a clear and concise focus for the essay, analysis, that you're analyzing the portions of the story or in terms of the themes or motifs or whatever that we're looking for, that you do have analysis. And so go back to that summary versus analysis. Make sure you're doing summary, or you're not doing just summary, you're doing analysis. And then multiple meanings. So basically multiple meanings and perspectives means that you're acknowledging that this is an interpretive exercise, that there are other possible interpretations, and that you're trying to just pull out one possible interpretation. And that really, again, is about avoiding summary and not, you know, just saying this is what it's about, because there's no interpretive exercise going on there. Okay, and even in some places, like if you decide to write about figurative language in the birthmark, for instance, you may mention several things that the birthmark could possibly represent. And maybe it does represent more than one thing, right? So you're showing that you understand that there are multiple perspectives. The next one is voice, so that I hear your voice coming through in the essay, and that's definitely important as well. Number 5 is organization. So you want to make sure that it's clearly organized, has a beginning, middle, and end, an intro, a body, and a conclusion. Details is that you're including pertinent details, quotes from the text, summaries of parts of the text, and that they're clearly related to the argument that you're making in your thesis. That's the selection of details part. Sentence structure is not just that you aren't writing in fragments or run-ons, although that's part of it, but also that you're varying your sentence structure. You're not starting everything with I think, subject, verb, object. You want to use different kinds of sentence structure, not just one. Maybe a semicolon or a dependent clause here or there. Language is your word choice, so your vocabulary, that it's appropriate but sophisticated is what we're looking for in an A paper, which doesn't necessarily mean you use a thesaurus for every word. It means that it shows fluency with your vocabulary. Mla Conventions is your citation, so that you are using quotes correctly, that you're introducing them correctly with a signal phrase, and that you're then citing them correctly with in-text parenthetical citations that correspond to the works cited page at the end of the paper. And then surface features is grammar and mechanics, so making sure that you're relatively free of errors, you're proofreading carefully, you're running your spell check. I think I say on the assignment sheet that there's no excuse for a paper that hasn't been spell checked. you know, there are typos. There's always a typo. Typos aren't a big deal, but pervasive errors, lots of typos. If it's clear that you haven't even run your spelling and grammar check or proofread at all, we're in English 102 now. This is your last sort of capstone class of college level writing, and then you'll be moving on to writing in your subject area. So I want to see that you know how to polish a paper. So make sure you're giving time to the proofreading section. And mentioning that, you could also use some of the resources that are available to you, like the Learning Center, if you're able to come in and go to the Learning Center and have somebody else read over your paper with you to work on content or to work on surface, whatever. Okay, so that's the rubric, and then so you'll get a score in each of those for, you know, what you're getting, and you'll at the end you'll get a percentage score out of 100, and then you will get some comments at the bottom. The comments on this will be less detailed than what you'll get on your longer essays. Your longer essays will go through a whole process where you'll be able to submit a draft to me, you'll do peer editing, and then you will submit the final draft. That's pretty much it. Don't forget to take the extra credit quiz, which will cover character and figurative language and the stuff from the MLA Citation slideshow. And those are good. Take those extra credit quizzes. They might not seem like a lot of points, but points add up, and also they sort of test that you're really processing the information you need to process in the reading and the slideshow, which is important for doing the larger, higher point assignment of the reader response. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there were some changes made in Blackboard over the past weekend or the last couple of days, and so if you're having trouble with submitting or anything in Blackboard, please call the ITS help desk and report any issues or glitches that you see, and they will also help you so that you can get your assignments in on time. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. Whew, I'll talk to you next week.